Peace Negotiations, Chapter 1. A yawn burst forth from my mouth, breaking me away from my reading. I looked up from my book to check what time it was. There was no clock in the Royal Library, so I had to estimate how much time had passed by the amount of light coming in through the window. Considering that it was now dark out, roughly 2 or 3 hours had gone by since I had sat in my favorite reading nook with a good book. I stretched until a satisfying pop loosened my stiff joints, then I stood and made my way to the entrance of the library. I had been through the maze of bookshelves enough times to know the shortest path to my destination. On my way out, I waved at the pony sitting behind the front desk. She smiled and waved back. I lifted the book I was carrying so that she could see it, and lifted an eyebrow in a questioning manner. The old mare gave an affirmative nod, and went back to placing books on a cart to be returned to their proper shelves. I left with the book tucked firmly under my arm to be finished later. As I walked the halls between the library and my room, for what may have been the millionth time, I began to wonder if Celestia was still awake. Talking with her was always a pleasant experience, but her schedule was always so full that finding the time to talk was difficult. We might say hi to each other if we crossed paths while she was walking from one meeting to the next, but whenever she had a moment of free time, it was usually taken up by some complaining noble or another. I usually try to stay out of her way. I would hate to screw up the busy schedule of someone that runs a country. Supposedly, though, it had been even worse before Luna had returned and taken some of the burden off her sister's shoulders. I see Luna around more than Celestia, but that's not necessarily a good thing. In fact, I tried to avoid the Dark Alicorn when I could, but being a bit of a night owl means my chances of running into her increase dramatically. We've barely spoken a word to each other since my arrival to Equestria, but every time she sees me I get a glare, and I have no idea why. I've asked around, and apparently nobody else seems to know why either. The sound of clanking armor brought me out of my thoughts. A pair of patrolling night guards were heading down the hallway in the opposite direction that I was. Excuse me, guys," I said as they neared. They stopped and gave me their full attention. "Is there something we can do for you, sir?" one of them asked. The night guard had a reputation for seeming colder and less friendly than their solar counterpart, but I just saw it as trying to be more professional. Unlike the princess they served, the night guard were pretty cool guys once you got to know some of them. "Sorry to bother you guys while you're on patrol, but do either of you happen to know if Princess Celestia is still up?" "It's okay, sir. We're here to serve. And no, she is not awake. Between the Griffin Ambassador a few days ago and the Changeling negotiations, she hasn't gotten much sleep. She even closed day court an hour early, so she could retire early today." I smiled slightly at the info dump. Leave it to the night guard to know what's going on. That's one of the reasons I preferred them over the day guard. They didn't half-ass anything. And I also knew that they normally wouldn't give so much information to someone, but I had been here long enough for them to realize that I was no threat to either of their charges. "Alright, that's all I needed to know. Thank you. You guys have a good night." "You as well, sir," the guard said before the pair were on their way again. I had nearly forgotten about the peace negotiations going on between Equestria and the Changeling Hive. I wasn't involved in them, and they were surprisingly low profile, considering the Hive had invaded Equestria several months ago. I was there for the wedding, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. Well, okay. There for the wedding might be the wrong way to put it. I wasn't invited to the wedding, but I had still been living in the castle at the time. I hadn't got a look at the queen, but I had been closer to some of her cronies than I would have liked. Luckily, the invasion failed in the end, and even more surprisingly, there had been no deaths on either side. Sure, there were a few injuries that required hospital visits, but the fact that nobody had died on either side still baffled me. I knew that Queen Chrysalis was currently staying in the castle for the negotiations, but fortunately for me, I hadn't run into her in the halls yet. I'd heard from some of the maids that she's quite unpleasant to look at. It wasn't long after that thought that I arrived at the door to the room I had been residing in since my arrival in Equestria. There wasn't much in there other than the stuff the room had originally come with. I wasn't really allowed outside the castle grounds, so I couldn't really get my hands on anything to decorate the room with. Occasionally, a small pile of books would take up some desk or floor space when I found a good series to read, but other than that, it was pretty bare bones. As bare bones as a guest room in a royal castle can be, anyway. I turned the handle and pushed the door inward to reveal my room. I immediately noticed the mare lying in my bed. Apparently she noticed me too, and she gave me a sultry look and a sly smile before she spoke in a sing-song voice.
"Hello."
she simply said. I just stared for a second before responding. Hi. Sorry, I must have the wrong room. I didn't mean to bother you, I said before slowly backing out and closing the door. I knew for a fact that it was the right room, but like I said before, mine was practically indistinguishable from any other guest room in the castle. I didn't feel like causing a scene just because someone happened to pick the room I usually stayed in, and besides, the one next to it would work just fine for my purposes. I walked to the next room over and stepped inside. I flipped the magical light switch and sat at the desk to continue the novel I'd started back in the library. I had just flipped to the page I'd left off on when someone knocked at the door. That was strange. Who could be knocking at this hour, and how'd they know to find me in this room instead of my usual one? I got back up and approached the door. I opened it to find the mare that had been lying on my bed standing outside. She was frowning and looked a little ticked off. Can I help you? I asked.
What was that?
She asked. Sorry, what?
What was that?
What was what? I asked confusedly.
In the other room. What stallion walks in on that and just walks away?
I'm sorry? Was I supposed to do something else?
Yes, you were supposed to show some kind of interest, ravish me, anything but that.
I stood there for a second and absorbed the fact that some random pony I didn't know had just said that I should ravish them. I'm sorry, ma'am. You seem nice, but I'm not like that, and I'm not really into ponies. I'm sure there are plenty of cool guys looking for someone like you around Canterlot. Maybe try your luck with one of them. Have a good night, I said as I slowly closed the door again. That was definitely strange. I wondered if she was drunk. That might explain the way that she was acting. I certainly hope that she didn't make a habit of asking strangers to ravish her. I turned to go back to the desk and my book, but I didn't even make it 2 steps before another harsher knock rang through the door. I cracked it open just enough for my face to show through and addressed the now pissed-looking mare. Look, ma'am, like I said earlier, I'm not interested—
It appears,
she interrupted,
that I need to be more direct.
The sing-song quality of her voice disappeared, and a slight buzzing replaced it. A wall of green fire raced along her body as she transformed before my eyes. The changeling before me was much taller than the ones I had run into at the royal wedding all those months ago and had a chitinous crown atop her head.
You are mine. The treaty has been finalized, and you have been given to me as tribute,
the changeling queen said in a menacing voice. I slowly closed the door again, and the click of the lock quickly followed by the click of the latch. I sat at the desk again and tried to get back to reading, but I noticed that my hands were trembling a bit. I tried to calm myself, but after what had just happened, I wasn't sure I could. I looked back at the door just in time to see a green aura undo the lock, and the door slammed inwards.
Human, you belong to—
She was cut off as I reflexively chucked the book at her face. It was a solid hit, too. She crumpled to the floor like a rag doll. I sat there in stunned silence, and I just stared at the changeling lying on the floor. She appeared to be unconscious, now that she wasn't yelling at me, and she didn't actually look all that intimidating. I started to feel kind of bad. Sure, she had scared me and busted in the door, but I didn't mean to hurt her. Oh well. What's done was done. I walked over and picked up the book. A couple of pages were wrinkled from either its meeting with the queen's face or its meeting with the floor. I smoothed them out as best as I could before closing the book and placed it back on the desk. There was no sense in ruining a perfectly good book. I went back over to Chrysalis onto the floor and gave her a gentle nudge with my foot. Yep, definitely out cold. But what to do with her? I thought. When no other ideas struck me, I did the first thing that came to mind. I went over to the bed and pulled back the comforter. I quickly scooped her up and laid her out on the bed and adjusted her to a position that I thought looked comfortable before pulling the comforter back over her. I grabbed the book off the desk and flipped the light switch before closing the door and heading back to my usual room, making sure the door was locked and the desk was pushed in front of the entrance for good measure. I once again placed the book on the desk and climbed myself into bed. I had done enough reading for one day. Damn, Anon got some good accuracy. Either that or the desk was close to the entrance. Either way, I'd love to give a very special thank you to my accurate donators. Top donator, Dash of Evergreen, Peter Coulthard, Dresdon, Dospo, RuneScythe9852, CourierCruz CI, Delta Omega, Ryanny Dragonwolf, Dwight Cornel, Gagi, Secret Moon, Tallrascha, Starlight Glimmer, David D. Sanchez, Trey, Pokekiller Zach, Soul Dragon, Dak Britton, and Joe Piercy. Thank you all very much for watching this video, and I will see you all in the next one.